It makes me want to have a bowl. So Eddie Darcy is again another youth worker, but a head gardener, CEO. Eddie has a long history in the field of youth work, including a number of years in Coolor House. He spent 27 years leading and developing Ronanstown Youth Service in Neilstown, and has served as head of youth work with CYC. For the past 2 years, he's been contributing to the Solace Project Compass program. Eddie is a master's in youth work from Maynooth University and has received a number of prestigious awards for his work with young people, including the John O'Connell Award. So again, like this is a man who's got amazing years of experience behind him, and he's coming out calling upon the government to end this silly war on drugs that's empowering the organised crime gangs out there to come in and exploit our young people, to undermine the work of Eddie. Because while Eddie, you know, as I said, these people are already working with limited resources, and you can see what's afforded not only to the Gardaí but to the organised crime gangs. Look at the money and the power that they have in the communities that they work in, where they take advantage of some of the most vulnerable within those communities. Some of the more uneducated of the kids, some of the more naive of the kids, you know, some of the more abused of the kids, you know, some of the kids that are more lacking, who are looking for somebody to look up to. You know, these criminals fill the void a lot of the times, because people like Eddie, people like Jared, you know, they're very limited in their resources and working and reaching out to these kids. It's a crazy system that we have, but Eddie, as another signatory, and as I say, has been a youth worker since the early 1980s, and now works in the southwest inner city on a daily basis. And this is from Eddie himself. He says, on a daily basis, I witness the devastating effect that the drug gangs have on certain communities. He says the fear and the intimidation that families live under, the level of control they have within certain housing estates and flat complexes, the number of people who are serving prison sentences. In the decades he has been involved in youth work, he has seen the same cycles play out. He says, I was working in Clondalkin when Veronica Guerin was murdered. All the resources that were promised and a huge effort I put in, and many of the people involved were put behind bars. But demand drives the industry, he says, and no matter how many shipments the Gardaí seize or drug dealers put in prison, the trade always survives. Even enormous success in terms of seizures hasn't radically affected the trade. It hasn't radically affected the gangs, and it hasn't affected the level of drugs in our communities. Darcy argues, in fact, that things are getting even worse now, and they are. The fucking facts are showing that too. The drugs trade, he says, has extended into rural Ireland now, and drug debt and intimidation are also starting to affect middle-class families. He knows of many parents who have found themselves paying a child's drug debt under the threat of violence. It's not a war we're ever going to win. And George Rowe as well observes that the drug war is also a way in which working class communities are punished for a more widespread social issue. We know the main funders of the illegal drugs trade are the middle class, but they're not subject to the law in the way people from poor or marginalised backgrounds are. He said, who fills up the prisons? It's 4,000 people every year, mostly there for drug convictions from disadvantaged areas, and this has gone on for decades. The common sense grown up thing to do would be to treat drug use as normal adult behaviour. And that's a quote from Jared himself. He says, people who run into problems with addiction, we need to treat that rather than criminalising and punishing people. That just pushes people further into addiction, and it just fills up our prisons. We cannot police our way out of this issue. So again, that's coming from Jared Rowe there. And back to Darcy, he says, with the criminalisation, the state is basically saying, and this is why, and I suppose to elaborate, like these signatories are not calling just for decriminalisation, but the regulation of all drugs, all of the drugs that, you know, not just cocaine and heroin, you know, cannabis, cocaine, heroin, all of them, MDMA, mushrooms, all of them. There should be no illegal drugs, because if you have an illegal drug, you're going to have organised crime gangs involved. And this is what Darcy has to say on that. With the decriminalisation only approach, the state is basically saying you can smoke your weed, but you have to buy it from a criminal gang. We're going to allow you to carry heroin and go to an injecting centre, but you have to buy it from a criminal gang. Those same criminal gangs have no hesitation about beating people up, no hesitation in shooting people, no hesitation in you putting huge pressure on people to be involved in the illegal trade. And a lot of the time, that's kids that they put this pressure on. He says, I want to take the gangs out of this picture, and I believe that if you took the money out of it, the gangs would disappear almost overnight. What about the concern that regularisation would lead to an increase in the use and availability of drugs? And Darcy notes that the countries where drug laws have been relaxed, there is no evidence of overall increase in the drug use. He also observes that drugs are already readily available, and he says, I lecture part-time in the youth work course in Dundalk Institute of Technology, and most of the students there would be from what would be seen as a very rural backgrounds. And in their little village or rural hamlet, if anybody wants a line of coke or a few joints, nobody has any difficulty in getting it at all. He says they don't have all the answers. They're not outlining what a regulated legal drugs trade would look like. Darcy says he favours a non-profit system. Man, me and you, Darcy, are definitely singing from the same hymn sheet here, bud. But he says he favours a non-profit system similar to the state-run alcohol dispensaries in Finland, but he believes there are experts who are better qualified to work out these details. He is qualified, he says, to start a conversation about how prohibition has failed to reduce crime, addiction and the availability of drugs. He says, I'm not in any way condoning or minimising the impact drugs have on people. He says, this is about trying to highlight a drug war we can't win. I am not advocating free availability of drugs from the point of view that they're safe. I'm doing it from the point of view that I want to remove the drug gangs and I want to have some regulation in the market. A drug gang doesn't give a shit about the quality of product or what they're mixing it with or if there's a bad batch. They don't care whether they're selling it to a 12-year-old or a 19-year-old. And you know, prohibition enables all of this. It increases harm. It doesn't reduce harm. I sincerely believe that we can manage this issue better, but not under the current paradigm of prohibition. If the Misuse of Drugs Act was put in place to stop people from using drugs, it has catastrophically failed, and it never has been as bad as what it currently is. So again, guys, amazing work there by these community youth workers out, you know, again, stepping out and into the forefront now, because this has been such a topical issue for so long, and it's something people shied away from, as Jared would have highlighted in the interview that he did with myself. You know, that he was one of few speaking out at the time. And now there's over 100 of them. I think that there's 123 names, I believe, in total have signed up to this. Like, so to go from Jared expressing, you know, there's not many of us, I feel kind of on the outside, on the fringe of things, to this now. This is a major step forward, and I think this is really going to help speed up the progress here in drug policy reform in Ireland. And again, you know, just to go back to it for our own community, guys, for the cannabis community, the 10th of July is your opportunity to get out there and stand up and speak up for the end of your oppression. Do you know, because what these youth workers are speaking up for is the young people in our communities, and they're speaking up for all drugs. It's not just cannabis. But I look forward to hearing more from this group of people as well. And as I say, included in this, there was hundreds of names there, but also included in there was Eileen Flynn. Eileen Flynn, who is from a traveller background herself, and interesting enough, one of the first traveller politicians in Ireland, first traveller senator, I suppose. But she says that she endorses this position because she believes the illegal drugs trade and the war against it causes more harm to the communities in which they work than the addiction does alone. They argue that if the state regulated these drugs, dangerous criminals would effectively be cut out of the market, and youth workers, social workers and clinicians could focus on treating drug addiction as a social problem and as an issue of public health. John, like, don't need to really say anymore. Like, an incredible bunch of people. Like, geez, I could nearly just like take off my hat now and kind of retire, and knowing that we've got an incredible bunch of people who are going to achieve a lot more than what I ever could have on my own. So I'm fucking very happy to be able to see this happening, because as I say, like, the youth, they're not being represented, that they're overexploited by the organised crime gangs, and now to see the youth workers come out finally in favour of the decriminalisation and regulation of all drugs. Wow, that's just fucking, you know, to all of them, like, well done, like, happy days, like, you made me so happy. We drive on then, so guys, you know, because Well, this is very positive news, and I maybe should have finished with this because it kind of goes a little bit downhill from here afterwards then, like, you know, but we'll get through it as we do. It makes me want to have a bowl.